Yo, what's up, and welcome back to another episode of Starlight Beacon. Here for a review of episode 3 of The Bad Batch. Um, Happy Friday to everybody. First of all, first and foremost, let's get that out the way. Hope you all are having a good Friday. I'm having a good Friday. This was a pretty solid episode. Um, it's a filler episode, but it's a good filler episode. I'm gonna get into it because actually, I'm not really gonna focus too much on the Bad Batch for this review because that wasn't the strength of the episode for me. For me, the episode strength were the stuff on Camino, the stuff with Crosshair, and the things dealing with the Empire, or at least the early stages of the Imperial transition. So yeah, let's get into that. I think overall for the episodes, it is a 6, but it's a very solid 6 for me. It's not a low 6. And that's primarily because it's a filler episode, so it's hard to give a filler episode like a high mark. However, they do set up a lot of things that could have potential, um, you know, world building events, if you will. One thing I have to say, between this, Andor and Kenobi, we're gonna get a lot more of the world right after Order 66, which we haven't really gotten a lot of in canon up to this point. Like usually we do get it, you know what I'm saying? Like it's covered, but it's a very concise type of telling. Like, all right, Order 66 happens, and then they stop using the clones because Jango Fett is dead. They don't have a suitable donor. They go to conscription soldiers, and then they slowly phase out the clone troopers. And the clone troopers basically go from being the face of the Empire and the Republic to more of a advisory teacher role. They're kind of sort of at the Imperial Academy teaching the cadets, the ways of being a soldier. But, one thing that they've been harping on, and one thing that's always been a constant, is that the quality of the soldiers can't compare to the clones because the clones are bred for combat. So unless you're going to go out and get a Mandalorian army to fight for you, like, they're not going to be on the same level as the clone troopers because that's exactly what they were bred for. They were bred for combat. And other things within the lore kind of sort of get into that, even in canon and legends. But I'm hoping that this series is going to dive into that a little bit more, give some more context. One thing that stood out to me was I think we're seeing the seeds of the Death Trooper program, or at least the Special Forces division of the Imperial Navy, or Imperial Military, really. That's kind of sort of where I'm at with it. Like, it's like, all right, clearly the Death Troopers and the Dark Troopers and all of that, they're the elite soldiers within the Empire. And that's kind of sort of what Tarkin wants. That's what he's trying to get at. Like, we need conscription soldiers to be on the ground as enforcers to kind of enforce Imperial law, but we need kind of a special division that can handle some of the more elite tasks. Like, I think we're seeing, we could see Inferno Squadron. I think was in the Discord, and who was it? I think it was Star Wars News said that they believe that the female with the ponytail that we see in the episode is actually Iden Versio's mother, which I'm like, okay, yeah, that actually does make sense because Iden Versio would be, I don't think she'd be born yet, or she'd be far too young to be that soldier that we see in the black stormtrooper gear. There's also some things with the soldier that kind of gets into it with Crosshair and meets his untimely fate within the episode that I think is an important thing for Star Wars to kind of handle, because what we got to understand is, like, we see the Empire as this evil force, this villain, right, within the galaxy. And what we got to understand, or what Lucasfilm has to do, is help people understand like what it is about the Empire that how do people see the good in the Empire? Like, why did so many billions or millions of civilians enlist in the Imperial Army? And the soldier kind of touches on it a bit. Like, for him, because the Empire has provided him with housing and food and shelter and things of that nature, just the basic essentials, that's far more than the Republic ever did for him. And I think that's a very significant point, and is a very important thing for them to kind of sort of delve into within this series and other series like Andor and Kenobi. Like, what is the state of the galaxy? Like, why are so many people on board with the Empire? And so things like that kind of help build the world. And because of that, that's why this is a good filler episode, because we get some context and some insight into the regular people within the galaxy and how they view the Empire versus the Republic, because not everybody was on board with the rebellion. Not everybody was on board with the Empire. Like, that's part of the issue with, that's the the good and bad of democracy. Like, democracy is fair, but fair is not always equal. And I hope they continue to give us some more of those elements and give us some more of those story points that highlight how the Republic failed a lot of the people within the galaxy and the people that it represented. I have a book. My mom is in the chat. What's going on? Hey, Ma, how you doing? What did she say? What's going on, Gumbo? Friday, pretty nice episode. I agree. I think it was a solid episode. I gave it a 6. By the way, on a scale of 1 to 10, everybody, go ahead and drop that in the comments. Where do you rank this episode? I gave it a 6. Let me know where you rank it out of 6 out of 10, or out of 1 out of 10. Excuse me. On a scale of 1 to 10. But yeah, so I have a book that's called The Essential Guide to Warfare for Star Wars. And it's kind of sort of in this gray area of canon. There are some canonical elements within the book, but then there are also some elements that are no longer canon. So it kind of lives in the gray area. One thing that I found interesting in this book, I'm going to go kind of off topic to come back and make my point, because this is a very important thing to me. It ties into what this man was talking about in this episode. For me, in the Essential Guide to Warfare, they kind of talk about, how the Senate within the Republic was structured. Basically, one senator within the Republic. Now, let's go back to, Phantom Menace in episode 2, when we see the big Senate tower with all of those senators representing worlds. Well, one thing this book tells us is that each senator basically represented about 1,000 worlds. So, the galaxy is divided into these sectors, and basically, for instance, Naboo, right? Padme Amidala. We know that she represented Naboo. She's from Naboo, but as a senator, she represents more than Naboo. There are also another 1,000 systems that she also represents in the Senate, which is an important detail that I think helps to build the case for the separatists. Now, just imagine this for a second, right? Like, we know how politics are within the United States. I'm U.S. citizen, but like anybody who lives in a democratic society, we understand how voting works, right? So, like, let's say, for instance, you're in a world that's a part of the Republic that has maybe 2 billion people, and then you got a world like Naboo where it's more populated, so you got like 6 to 8 billion people, let's say. Or let's say, use Earth for an example. Like, let's say Earth was in Star Wars, right? We got about 8 billion people on this planet. Let's say the sector of space that we represent, we have the highest pop cap of this represented area. Well, that gives us an incredible amount of power when it comes to our vote, because wherever we sit, if we're in the majority, then, more than likely, because we have the highest pop cap, if we can get other systems to vote in our favor, then of course we're going to get our way. But that leaves a lot of, several billion other people kind of sort of out on the fringes. Like, certain things that are prioritized for Naboo or for Earth aren't necessarily big issues on other systems, but because, bigger systems like Naboo, like Earth, or, any other larger systems, they've prioritized these issues, they get pushed through first. And so, like, those smaller systems get less representation. And that's why we have the Confederation of Independent Systems. That's why we have the Separatists in the first place. That's what causes the divide, because democracy is fair, but it's not equal. So now, with him saying, the soldier that I'm talking about, with him, making that statement, and I know that's like not a big deal, but it kind of is. Like, him saying that, like, I've got housing, I've got food, I don't have to worry about where I'm going to eat, stuff like that. Basic essential needs the Empire has met, and that's more than the Republic has ever done. And so for me, I'm like, that's an important detail that you kind of gotta, that's why you need filler episodes, because that really does a good job of establishing the lore and building this, helping the audience understand why people see the Empire in a good light, see the Empire as something that's worth fighting for. That's a very important thing for them to establish. Go to the comments real quick. Star Wars MCU OG, what's happening? Good to see you. I thought it was a good episode. 7 out of 10. 7. Okay, good. 7. That's surprising to me. We got 2 7s in the chat so far. Like, I felt like this would be a lower ranked episode. Like, I mean, I still feel like it's a 6, because it doesn't really push the story forward as far as our main characters, but it's not a bad episode. You know what I'm saying? Now, for me, I believe that and I don't know what the directives are at Lucasfilm and how they kind of sort of write these stories, but for me, we see it all the time in anime, but anime kind of goes overboard a little bit with it, but they will do filler episodes where we don't see the main characters, right? And I think this is an episode where we could have gotten more on the Empire stuff and the Kaminoans and like all of that stuff with, Tarkin and the Supreme Chancellor, or not the Supreme Chancellor, but the leader of Kamino, and them all trying to figure out, what is the Empire trying to do, because Tarkin is not telling them everything, and they're not telling Tarkin everything. So all of that stuff is interesting to me. That's a good world building narrative. Star Wars Santa, what's going on? Can't listen, but want to drop in and say thanks for the fun chat earlier. Yeah, no doubt, man. I'm definitely going to come back and talk, Thrawn with you guys, because that was a fun conversation. Definitely. I appreciate you stopping by today. This is awesome. Yeah, but, let me know next time, once you finish the book, or if you have another conversation about the Thrawn novel, I'll be more than happy to hop in, chat, and chop it up with you again. That was great. So yeah. So, all right. Now, all of that stuff, the politics of Star Wars, the politics of the Empire and the Republic, the Rebel Alliance, or the Partisans. I think we'll definitely see the establishment of the Partisans by name by the time, probably before the season is over. Another interesting thing was the Operation War Mantle, is what it was called. I think this is I think that's going to be what creates the Death Troopers, those black armored stormtroopers that we see in Rogue One, and also Inferno Squadron. I think that's going to end up being the special forces unit of the Empire, the ones that are kind of like these guys are the best of the best. Um, and I think we're establishing that within this within the within the Bad Batch, which is kind of cool. Yes. Okay. So Crosshair and the other soldier, they kind of get into it a bit. He ends up killing them, but I still feel like it was very important that that moment happened. That we even heard a conversation with these uh, the first group of conscription soldiers that we see on screen, talking about how they're looking forward to fighting for for not the Republic but the Empire. They were also Republic. They fought for the Republic as well. Now, something some people, a lot of people probably don't know about just how the Republic is structured or was structured uh, before the formation of the Grand Army of the Republic with the clones and all that during the Clone Wars. Um, the Republic had demilitarized, and now this hasn't been firmly established in canon yet or reestablished in canon, but to give you some context for those who don't know, there was no standing army prior to the uh, Grand Army of the Republic, at least for 1,000 years within the Republic, because after the Battle of Rusan, now this is in Legends, this is not officially canon yet, but this is what happens. The Battle of Rusan was the last battle between the Republic, the Jedi, and the Sith Empire, or what remained of the Sith Empire. That was the final battle. That's what ended um, the. That's what started the Bane lineage. That's where he blew up the thought bomb or exploded the thought bomb, which killed the Brotherhood of Darkness or the Dark Brotherhood. I can't remember which one it is, but basically the last of the Sith, leaving only Bane and his apprentice. And the Republic and the Jedi, of course, assumed that all of the Jedi, or not the Jedi, but all of the Sith were destroyed during this battle. And now they had fought the Sith for thousands of years prior. So like, the galaxy is kind of like, I would liken it to feudal age Japan during the Shogunate, like the height of it when it was just endless warfare for hundreds of years. That was kind of the state of the galaxy. Like the Republic and the Jedi from the old Republic are vastly different from the Republic and the Jedi that we know from the prequels. These are warriors. These are soldiers. Like they faced endless battles, constant conflict. They were battle hardened. They were warriors. And then after Rusan and the war is finally over, they've got all these warships, but the Republic is ready for peace, and so are the Jedi. So what they do is they sign a treaty which limits the size of capital ships within the galaxy, and they also dismantle the upstanding army and allow each system to basically control the budget for their own military, defense act. So each system within the Republic is responsible for its, planetary defense. And then a few of the warships, the older warships from the Republic, are donated to these Republic worlds as planetary defense ships. And some of the soldiers who are, now former soldiers of the Republic, they go back to their home worlds and they enlist in their planetary defense force. And I said all that to say, I believe this is where these soldiers are coming from, that we see that enlisting the Republic. They're just former planetary defense soldiers that were, a part of the Republic during the Clone Wars, now out of their line of work. So now they're joining the Empire because they couldn't enlist in the Republic military during the Clone Wars. So now they can, enlist during at the time of the Empire, because they are actually looking to recruit new soldiers. Carol, Belinda, what's happening? Good to see y'all. Thank y'all for joining. I'm really getting into a very nerdy conversation about Star Wars. So if stuff is going over your head, just ask me a question, because like I'm explaining what, or kind of sort of speculating and explaining what I enjoyed about the episode and what it could potentially set up for the world. And so if you want to, hang around for this ride, that's what we're going to do. Okay, so yes, that's kind of sort of the state of the galaxy. Like, each of these planets has their own planetary defense, budget that, they fund their militaries with. And these are just kind of there to handle any in-system dispute. So if there's like, a colony on a moon within that system, and there's some sort of issue, the planetary defense force is the first one to respond. And then, if this is like a larger battle, or let's say during the Clone Wars, if these were separatist ships that showed up, then the planetary defense would make a call to the Republic and say, hey, look, we're going to get outgunned here. We need some reinforcements. And depending on the stage of the war and what was going on in the rest of the galaxy, and if they could actually afford to send troops to that system, the Republic of course would, but sometimes they wouldn't. So this is all the stuff that isn't seen on screen, but you read about in other source material. But the Ruusan Reformation is a very important thing within the Star Wars universe, or it was in the EU, because that's why the Republic didn't have an army at the start of Episode 2, because of the Ruusan Reformation Act. They had disbanded their military. They had disbanded their large vessels. Speaking of large vessels, they actually this is not canon, but there was a ship that was almost the size of a superstar destroyer during the Ruusan Reformation. I think it was called the Praetor. I can't remember, but it looked exactly like a star destroyer. It was a prototype star destroyer, superstar destroyer. These ships were basically, a lot of them were basically cut down, and some of them were actually donated to the planets as, a planetary defense ship, because they're big and they're slow. They can't move fast. So they almost act as battle stations. And then you have other ships that come in to reinforce it, to help with its defense. But yeah, it's a good, those large dreadnoughts are like, in capital ships, are good deterrents for large scale engagements. They made a lot of potential threats second guess whether or not they would attack a system, because if they knew one of those things was in orbit, they were like, yeah, we probably don't have the firepower to deal with that, so we're not going to do it. There was also is a rumor that one of those was actually in the Battle of Coruscant at the beginning of Episode 3, but you don't see it on camera, but it's supposed to be there in orbit. That was at one point in canon. I don't know if that's even canon anymore, but I don't even think those ships are. But once again, like I said, going on tangent here, but the Ruusan Reformation, Senate representation, like I said, you got one senator within the Senate during the time of the Republic representing 1,000 worlds, and each of these 1,000 worlds has a varying, population size. So not all of these issues are actually being addressed within each of these worlds, because of course it's democracy, so majority rules. Fair is not always equal. So that's what leads the way for the Clone Wars to even happen, for the Separatist movement to even happen within the galaxy. All of that's there. It's kind of just, Palpatine is just adding fuel to the fire, but the tenders are already hot. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's there. He's just kind of sort of nudging it. And that's kind of sort of, that is the brilliance of his plan. Like, he just understood the state of the galaxy and how fragile the Republic was due to the bureaucracy and the other things that can impede the democratic process. And he just leaned into that and fed into people's fears and riled them up to get them into believing that leaving the Republic was the best option. Now we're here. Now we are in the time of the Galactic Empire, and we have an empire that really needs to grow and needs to maintain stability within the galaxy, because the truth of the matter is Palpatine orchestrated both sides of the conflict. The Separatists, he was in control of the Separatists. He was also the Supreme Chancellor of the Republic. So because he basically is the puppet master, he now controls the entire galaxy. So all of these surrendered separatist worlds are now under the banner of the Empire. And now all of these people who are probably poor, underclass, lower class citizens, they now have the opportunity to join the Republic. I mean, not the Republic, but the Imperial military. And due to that, you get, that's free housing. They get, fed every day. Their families are good because now they've got income. They can send money back to their families and what have you. So the Empire in many ways is providing for people who may not have had those opportunities with the Republic. And that's the kind of sort of the point that I think the dude was getting at, or at least that's what I took from it. And that's why I'm like, that's a very important thing for this story to kind of cover. And I'm hoping that we get more of that. And I think I wouldn't mind, an episode or two where, we don't even see the Bad Batch. Like, all right, this episode, we're going to go back to Kamino. We're going to look at the Kaminoans. We're going to deal with how the Kaminoans are handling Tarkin and how are they trying to get him and sway him to, commit to buying more clones. I think that's an interesting thing. Like, that's, for me, the Bad Batch series hasn't been something that I was looking forward to, but the underlying surprise of it, of course, Omega being the big one. I really like Omega, but also the world building in this time period, because this is the most in-depth kind of sort of look we've gotten at this time period. Like, as I've said before, everything we've gotten up to this point has been sort of like a concise view of this era. So I'm really looking forward to that. Like, I hope they help us see and get a perspective of citizens in the Empire that see the Empire in a favorable light, because it is important to understand like why people want to fight for the Empire in the first place. So if they can establish that, I'm 110% on board for that. Ducky, what's happening? Welcome. Coop Daddy Yoda is sending greetings, certified Gumbo. How you doing, sir? Good to see you. Coop Daddy Yoda. Do they bring balance to the universe to avoid dominance? That is an interesting question. Do they bring balance to the universe to avoid dominance? Who is they, first of all? Are we talking about the Empire, or like who are we talking about? Because if it's the Empire, then no, they are all about dominance. But if we're still talking about the Republic, possibly. Yeah. Let me see. Now, the Kaminoans have implied in both this episode and the previous episode that they have, some sort of ace up their sleeve in regards to the Bad Batch. Like, I think what Namase was saying, or at least implying in that conversation that she had at the end of the last episode, was that they can actually create super soldiers using just the DNA of the Bad Batch. And that may be the importance of Omega, because one, she's female and she's a clone, and all the clones are supposed to be male. So it's almost like these mutations that they've been engineering in the Bad Batch have led to the creation of Omega, and she is the key to the Kaminoans actually creating life from, like, unique life from clone DNA, which is an interesting thing. And I feel like that's where they're kind of going with that, which, going back to my point previously, it's like, yo, we do need more episodes that kind of showcase the Kaminoan stuff. Like, we need to understand what it is that they have to offer. We know that Kamino is not completely taken off the table, because when we see them in the Mandalorian, we know that Dr. Parshing was a Kaminoan scientist. Big difference, prior to that, like, the only Kaminoan scientists were actually Kaminoans. So, the fact that they had humans now working for them begs the question, like, was there a hostile takeover of Kamino by the Empire initiated by Tarkin? Because that's what it feels like we're leading to. Like, I feel like there's going to be some sort of confrontation or a huge disagreement or dispute between the Kaminoans and the Empire, and the Empire is not going to take that lightly. There's got to be a reason why we don't see Kaminoans in, later in the timeline, like during the original trilogy and during the time of the Mandalorian, and also during the sequel trilogy. They could still be around. I'm not saying that they're wiped out, but they're clearly not in charge of these facilities. Somehow all of this research too does lead to Palpatine's return in the sequel trilogy. All of this is very important because we know he's got, that Kaminoan cloning technology on Exegol. Like, this is, I don't know if it's in the, I think it's in the, it's not in the movie, but I think either in the novelization of the movie or in the visual guide for the sequel trilogy. It's somewhere that's all illustrated for us, and they tell us what it is. But I'm not sure where all that is. But I know for a fact that is a thing that's part of canon. So hopefully we'll see that explored a little bit. And I think that's what this series is going to touch on. Now, where are we at time-wise? Okay, we're 30 minutes in. All right, so I'm going to speculate a little bit here, because I want to do it Sunday. I lost power. We had a bad thunderstorm. So I was traveling Monday. I canceled the stream Sunday, Mother's Day, of course. So we were doing stuff like that. Mother's Day things. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. Actually, because I'll say that because I didn't have a stream Sunday. So happy Mother's Day to everyone. Belated Mother's Day. And then Monday I had a thunderstorm, so it knocked out power for hours. So that's why I didn't have a stream Monday. I'm like, okay, now I'll just wait till today. Now I'm here. Now let's speculate a little bit on what could possibly be coming with episode 4, because my actual prediction for episode 3 was that we were going to see Rex in this episode, which we didn't. We had a slight detour with the Bad Batch, but I'm sure next episode we'll see Rex. Like, we have to at some point get to that. Another kind of sort of interesting thing that they touched on in this episode, which was very significant, was I don't know if you all noticed, but Wrecker was complaining about his head and his headache, and I think that's it's more to it than what simply meets the eye, because he was holding his head, and it was the part of his head where the inhibitor chip is in their skull. I think he has sustained some level of damage to his inhibitor chip. And in the following scene, we see Tech working on a device, a scanner, that will show or do something to, what did he say? He said it would prove my theory on whether or not the inhibitor chips are defective. Now, we may see this come into play next episode, but we know for sure that Rex knows what the deal is with the inhibitor chips, because season 7 of the Clone Wars, we see that he has his inhibitor chip removed thanks to Ahsoka Tano. So now, how those inhibitor chips affect the Bad Batch is unclear. We know it definitely affected Crosshair. He's under the influence of it. That was confirmed in this episode. And then maybe Wrecker is in some capacity too now. It seems like it's going to affect him. I'm curious to see how long that is a storyline and how long that plays out. And, you know, if Rex, when they meet Rex, is going to tell them how to remove the chips. Another interesting thing is we know that, you know, Rex at some point meets up with Gregor and Commander Wolf. So, and they remove their chips. There's no way that they remove their chips before Order 66 happened. So this is a post Order 66 operation. I'm curious to see if we actually see that in the Bad Batch. It wouldn't surprise me if we do. But it also wouldn't surprise me if we see Caleb Doom, aka Kanan Jarrus, again. We see him in episode 1 as a Padawan. I wouldn't be surprised if we see an older version of Kanan in this series. And the reason why is because in Rebels, they kind of set it up to where he somehow knows about the inhibitor chips. He says as much in the show. How would he know about all of that? It's possible that, of course, he heard it, you know, just from past the conversation, him hanging out with Rebels and Saw Gerrera and the like, and, you know, conspiracy theories across the galaxy, they spread fast. Or he may have heard it directly from a member of the Bad Batch, like Hunter and the team. It's possible that we see Kanan again in this series, maybe a couple years down the road, where he's a teenager. Maybe he's no longer going by Caleb Dune, and he is now going by Kanan Jarrus. That's something that it wouldn't surprise me if we saw. And it wouldn't, you know, what we know about Dave Filoni is like continuity is going to be a thing. Like, he's going to connect his characters in any way he can, as long as it serves the story. And I don't think it's going to be too big an issue if Kanan Jarrus meets the Bad Batch again, and somehow that becomes part of the conversation, the inhibitor chip thing. Because they kind of sort of made it a real clear point in the first episode that Hunter went out of his way not to follow the Order 66. Like, he knew about it, they all knew about it, but they were like, it just doesn't make sense, we're not following that. So there's also that aspect of Kanan that, you know, these are spoilers for Rebels, by the way, but when he meets Rex for the first time, and Gregor and Wolf, he doesn't immediately attack. Now, I know Ahsoka tells him to trust her contact, which is the clones, but he was very adamant in that series about how much, well, it's really, there was a fear and just an anger that he exhibits in how he talks about the clones and how Order 66 happens and everything. Rightfully so, because, I mean, they gun down his master right in front of him, they turn on him, and what we know about the relationship between the Jedi generals and the clones was like, I mean, they were a family. Like, they were a tight-knit bunch. Like, they really got along very well. The Jedi bonded with the clones. The Jedi treated the clones as individuals and not as, like, well, the good Jedi did, because there were some examples that did otherwise, but that's another story. For the most part, most of the Jedi treated the clones as individuals, which is very important for the clones because they all wanted to be seen as individuals, which I think is a strength of the Clone Wars animated TV show, because they highlight, I think that's an important caveat in the clones, them being clones and still wanting to have their individuality, them all wanting to be their own person and not a number, and not just, the same face over like a million, copied over a million times over. So that's a cool aspect of it. And the Jedi honor that. Like, when the clones, tell them their name, like Commander Cody or Rex, the Jedi honor that. That's what they call them. That's what they refer to them as. And that's an important aspect in the relationship between the clones and the Jedi. Which, it just makes Order 66 that much more sad, tragic, really, because of how much the Jedi respected the clones and how much the clones respected the Jedi. And when Order 66 is given, they have literally no control over. They have to follow the order. They have to follow the directive. Like that chip forces them to go through with it. So, it's all interesting, and like, getting more on how they dealt with that. And I would like to see Wolf kind of talk about him taking out Plo Koon, because Plo was one of my favorite characters from the Clone Wars. Like, he's one of my favorite Jedi from that era, and I know he and Plo had a very close relationship. So, in hindsight, once he's removed that chip, like, how does that affect him? Like, that was somebody who, he had a tremendous amount of respect for, and yet this order is given and he has no choice but to follow it. Like, that's an interesting part of the a part of this story, and I hope that that's something that we get more of, whether that be in this series or in comic book series or what have you. But I always felt like that was a strength of the Clone Wars, like them giving the clones their own identity, and them also establishing the relationship between the Jedi and the clones, and how just how much the Jedi respected the clones as individuals. Like, they never talk about them as just, copies, just genetic, just property, really, because that's kind of sort of how they are referred to, as their property, their soldiers, they're bred to fight for combat. But the Jedi don't see them in that light, so that's a cool thing. But back to the Bad Batch, we've got 16 episodes. There's a lot that we're gonna possibly cover, and I think we're gonna see a lot more episodes like this one, where it's just world building and it's just establishing, what it is, what this political landscape is during this time period, because this is a very critical time period for the Republic. I mean, not the Republic, but the Empire, because everything they do right now is either going to it sets the foundation for their success or for their failure. And we know the Empire fails. So all of these decisions that they're making right now are what inevitably lead to their downfall. So, I think with that in mind, and I think Dave Filoni and the story group at Lucasfilm, but they're smart enough to know that. They seem to be moving in that direction with the story to showcase some of that stuff, because this is a golden opportunity for them to kind of sort of really firmly establish what transpires in this time period. Andor, I feel like, will also do the same thing, because they're close in proximity. I don't know when Andor begins, but I know it's in the early years of the rebellion. Now, we know technically in the Bad Batch, the Rebel Alliance doesn't even exist. Like, Saul Guerrera and his group will eventually become the Partisans, and we're going to see that, but that hadn't technically happened yet. So I'm pretty sure that's something that we'll establish, and it would be kind of cool if, when Andor begins, it kind of sort of starts with whatever episode we see Saul Guerrero officially established his partisans. And then that's kind of sort of where, Andor comes into play, because in canon we know that Cassian Andor was, he's from a separatist world. He's not a Republic. He didn't sympathize with the Republic. Like, he was on the other side of the conflict. So, and he's fighting alongside, because he says as much. He's fighting alongside people who were his enemies growing up, in the Republic. These are, the Rebel Alliance is comprised of both separatist worlds as well as Republic worlds, or people from those worlds. So all of that, I think that's a very important thing. Like, I think we should see some of the stuff that the Rebel Alliance does, or at least the partisans do, because I think having the partisans kind of sort of be that first group, that first rebel cell within the galaxy that kind of sort of is making noise, that inspires other rebel cells to do the same thing. That's a cool aspect. And Saul, he's technically not a separatist. He was under his world. Onderon was under control of the separatists for a moment, but they sought independence. And so, like, you've got all of these people coming from different walks of life that kind of represent the Rebel Alliance. We also know that early on in the Rebel Alliance's beginnings, they did a lot of nefarious things that aren't so green. They aren't so they're not so much, they weren't the white knights, if you will, that we know and love them to be. Like, they had to do some very dark things in order to help, grow their base and make sure that they could actually stand a chance against this monstrous empire. So all of that stuff, man, goes into this time period. This is a very interesting time period within Star Wars, and I'm glad that, like, the Bad Batch is really taking its time to kind of delve into some of this a little bit. So that's kind of sort of, that's been my review. I was actually going to go like 45 minutes, but I'm a little over now. But yeah, I'll be back on Sunday. I'll do a stream on Sunday. The Crimson Sokovian from the Den of Nerds, he's going to be joining me on Sunday. Hopefully, if everything goes well, if we can work that out scheduling wise. He's got an interesting fan fiction theory for Star Wars, post sequel trilogy that we're going to talk about a little bit, because he posted it in the Den of Nerds Discord today. We kind of had a small brief conversation about it. He agreed to come on Sunday, so we're going to try to make that happen. Make sure you tune into that if you want to hear some, I think it's a very interesting theory, and definitely tune in. Tomorrow, I don't actually know what the agenda is for tomorrow, but we will be streaming at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The Cookout, it was episode 41, 42. We're either going to continue with our Sony stuff, or we've got some news topics. I've really got to go back and look at what our topics are for tomorrow. I think we're going back to ranking the Marvel movies, but either way, that'll be 8 p.m. tomorrow Eastern, and Star Wars Sunday will be 7 Eastern Standard Time. But yeah, and then of course I'll be back Friday for another episode review, episode 4 of the Bad Batch. So tune in, same time, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you haven't yet, please subscribe, hit like, all that stuff helps us. We also have a Discord, because we talk about more things than Star Wars. We do talk about Star Wars, but we talk about things Marvel. We talk about DC, streaming platforms. Any kind of entertainment content going to any stream platform, we kind of talk about. We also talk about sports. We talk about music. We talk about anything, man. It's a fun time. Just come out, hang out with us in the Discord. I'm going to drop a link right now. And that's that. Thank you all for joining me today, tonight, whatever time it is, wherever you are. Appreciate it. And as I always say, peace, love, blessings, and may the force be with you always.